Hello everyone, my name is John Moy and welcome back. This is my second week of summer reading. Last week was the first week of summer, and so I talked about all the books I read, and I'm going to keep doing this until the end of the summer and the start of the school year. So this is the week of June 24th to June 30th. And less reading from last week. I've had more stuff to do. So I only finished 2 books, but I'm in the middle of, but I started reading an additional 3. So we're going to go through those now. Remember, I'm going to go through a short non-spoiler section of the books I've read, talk about what I'm reading next, and then do a more in-depth spoiler, not more in-depth, but a slight spoiler review for the books I finished this week. The first book I finished this week was The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. This is the first Discworld book, and it was such an interesting read because I love Discworld. It's my favorite fantasy series, and reading through this book there's so many elements of this novel that are Discworld, that make it uniquely Discworld, but they haven't yet matured to the point where Pratchett is. I mean, even a couple books later, the difference between The Color of Magic and then even Mort 3 books later, or Guards, 7 books later, the differences of how much Terry Pratchett's matured as a writer, and it's interesting to see kind of the characters and the locations and the settings that we see in much more detail and much more complexity later in the series for the first time. Despite kind of the things that make it feel a little off for Discworld, it's still Terry Pratchett's writing. It's hilarious. There are lots of great moments. I definitely enjoyed it more than Eric. It's probably a mid to low on the Discworld ranking for me, but it was still a super enjoyable time, and I just had a lot of fun with it. And then the second book I finished this week was What If 2 by Randall Munroe, and this is, it's already joined my top 10. It's my 4th favorite book, and I love not only this, but also its predecessor, What If, the original What If book. Every part of this book is amazing. There wasn't a single chapter where I was bored or where I was like just kind of rushing to get to the next chapter. Every single chapter is not only it's an interesting question, but the humor and the science he uses to tackle these questions just keep you engaged for the entire time. It's great because the chapters are so short. Just pick up and read a couple sections. And I can tell, just like with What If 1, which is probably my most reread book ever, this is definitely going to be reread a bunch of times. If you enjoy science, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. It's amazing. For me, it almost feels Discworldian, but from a more science-driven perspective. This is great. This is great. But that's all that I finished this week. I only finished 2 books this week. And that's mainly for a reason, for one big reason, and that's because I started Oathbringer this week. So that's upside down. I started Oathbringer this week. I got it from the library Wednesday. It was Wednesday, and so I've been reading. It's a big book. I'm on page about 950 at this point, and it's amazing. So far, I am loving it. Not as much as Words of Radiance. Definitely better than Way of Kings, in my opinion. But I am loving Oathbringer. But it's a thick book, so I've had less time to read other things. But I'm tearing through this book. I tear through everything that Brandon Sanderson writes, and this is no exception. So that's gonna be the first book I finish. After that, I am going to finish The Light Fantastic. I got probably 50 to 100 pages into The Light Fantastic on Monday, Tuesday, before I picked up Oathbringer on Wednesday. It's fun. I'm enjoying it immensely. Once again, it's still falling into that Colors of Magic area so far for the ranking, but it's enjoyable, and I think once I finish Oathbringer, I'm definitely going to dive back in. After that, I had to go to a swim meet for my sister on Wednesday, and so I brought The Truth because I wanted a paperback book because I didn't want to bring the really big Oathbringer. And immediately after reading The Color of Magic, it's super, super fun to be back with kind of later stage Discworld. The Truth is so far super funny. I'm on page 50. And I can definitely see why it's Brandon Sanderson's favorite Discworld novel. But I'm excited to finish this up in the next week. And then I haven't read any of Frugal Wizards this week, but it's still a book I have not finished. And then for what comes next, so definitely Oathbringer first. Then I'm gonna finish Color of Magic. Then I probably will read Dawn Shard after I finish The Light Fantastic. My bad. The Light Fantastic, and then once I finish that, I'm still waiting for Rhythm of War from the and the Arcanum Unbound from the library. So I'm gonna jump back into Discworld. So after that, I believe it's Sorcery, and just keep working my way through Sorcery. And the rest of the Wizards novels, finish The Truth and Frugal Wizards at some point along the way. But I will take a pause here, and I will see you in a second for the spoilers. All right, so there's only one book that I'm going to go into spoilers for because I haven't finished Oathbringer yet, and I mean, What If 2 is a great book, but there's no really spoilers to get into. It's just, I guess, the contents of the individual chapters, but I mean, just, there's nothing I really want to get into with that book, but definitely for The Color of Magic. Especially talking about the parts of Discworld that were so interesting to see later on. Probably the biggest thing that sticks out is how Death acts. Death is not typical for how we see later in the series, literally 3 books later with Mort. He's not at all like that. When Terry Pratchett wrote Mort, he got Death right in a way that he didn't in The Color of Magic. The Color of Magic, he seems very antagonistic towards Rincewind, quite often directly influencing events on the disc for no reason, which it's out of character, but for a first book, it can make sense why. One thing I was not expecting, because most of the books, I've read the Wizards books, I've read the Witches books, I've read everything but the Wizards books, and I was not expecting, starting with Eric and then going into Color of Magic, how diverse the locations and what we see of the disc, because the City Watch, it's fairly City Watch, Monk's Fallen, but even the Witches, which are more supernatural, even the Witches and Death, which are more supernatural, are fairly grounded novels. The Wizards, I don't know if that changes, but they are very out there with the scope of the storytelling and the scope of the storytelling and the places and the people that they go and meet. It's something that I was not expecting, especially coming from the other Discworld books, novels that I've read. And I don't know if that's something that continues throughout the series as we get to, I know they go unique places because Lost Continent and Last Hero both take place in unique locations. But I don't know with Sorcery and then eventually with Unseen Academicals if that continues through the entire series. And that was something that was interesting for me to see. I think that another thing is that Terry Pratchett keeps his magic, at least from what I've seen, keeps his magic system fairly soft. We get very few hard details of what magic is able to do. There's like hints here and there, but there's very few hard set rules of what magic is able to accomplish on the disc. And that is definitely present here, so I'm not sure if the Wizards will expand that. But I think that the magic rules are much looser here than even with the Witches books or further down the line. It's interesting for someone who does not expand his magic system. It definitely expands as the series goes on. Ankh-Morpork as a setting also feels a little off. Maybe that's probably because I spent the most time in the City Watch books. Those are the books I've reread the most. But Ankh-Morpork, it once again, kind of with Death, it's almost like the prototype of what Ankh-Morpork could be. Like, you have a mention of the guilds, but there are unlicensed thieves. The patrician doesn't act as you would expect the patrician to. Even the weird actions of the patrician and guards is way more consistent with his character than it is in The Color of Magic. There's a watch that actually breaks up fights. Never, not a million years. But, especially not before guards. But, once again, Ankh-Morpork, now, it still has the feel of Ankh-Morpork, it definitely establishes kind of almost kind of the general vibe that you get from Ankh-Morpork. That's consistent through the entire series in this book, but the kind of details and specifics are almost lost a little bit, especially compared to what comes later in the series. But Rincewind as a protagonist, wizard who can't do magic, is a lot of fun. It does help to keep the story, even with the fantastical places they go, it does help to keep the story more grounded with a more realistic protagonist who doesn't do magic. But I can see a lot of potential for him going forward, and that's been exciting to see. Two Flower is humorous, and the luggage is obviously a lot of fun. But yeah, definitely, this feels a lot like a Discworld prototype book rather than an actual Discworld book. But it's a fun time overall. It's a Discworld novel, so there's not a lot of complaints from me there. But that was the only spoilers that I had, and thank you again for watching. I'll be back next week, hopefully with Oathbringer finished, hopefully with the Light Fantastic finished as well, because I'm pretty significantly through both of those books. And then potentially The Truth or Dawn Shard. I don't know how long they'll take. But yes, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Goodbye.